Hey, listen up. Yeah, we here and we locked in. Let's keep it going all the way to the top 10. We fear the turtles, so it's no other option. Fred and Ryan, just watch them. Let's take it to the max. It's the Shell and Tell. They come with all the facts. It's the Shell and Tell. Let's take it to the max. It's the Shell and Tell. They come with all the facts. It's the Shell and Tell.
What's up, Terp fans? Fred, Ryan, and Ahmed back with another episode of the Shell and Tell podcast. It's Thursday, July 7th, and we got a lot to talk about on this week's show, man. A lot has changed over the last few days in the college sports world. It's going to have a major impact on football with the news of USC and UCLA joining the Big Ten.
Yeah, what does that mean for Maryland? I mean, you got these huge names coming in. Is this just more of the blue bloods that we got to deal with every year? Or is there something kind of intriguing about having these matchups brought into the Big Ten? We'll discuss.
And UCLA and USC, only really just started the conference expansion part 2. So what does that mean for this future of the sport? Postseason, bowl games, college football playoffs. There's a lot that, that could be impacted with these moves. So a lot of moving pieces, especially with the off season drawing to an end in a couple of weeks. So we shall see how it all shakes out.
What happens to the Pinstripe Bowl?
We love our Pinstripe Bowl.
We did love our Pinstripe Bowl.
That's for you, Bacon. Hey, before we do too much, man, this week's episode is brought to you by Quick Stretch and Body Works. Helps athletes with their performance and recovery periods on and off seasons. The naturally formulated athletic performance and recovery lotion is an easy, effective way for athletes to prepare for skill training and workouts in full swing. Founded by Todd Smith, a former college athlete and head athletic trainer at 2 college programs, and even some of the athletes at the University of Maryland are taking advantage of the product, including our guy, star linebacker Ruben Hippolyte II. Make sure you head over to quickstretchbodyworks.com and check it out. That address again is quickstretchbodyworks.com. All right, guys, like we mentioned, big changes to the big ahead. USC, UCLA headed to the Big Ten. We've got 2 years beginning in 2024. Your first thoughts, initial reaction to the news when it happened. It happened quickly because it happened in a span of 24 hours from it going from rumor to fact.
That was my first reaction, was just, how do you keep this a secret? All the things in the world that leak, all the people that have to be involved in a decision like that, for it to come out hours before this vote takes place in the Big Ten, it doesn't make any sense that that wasn't a news story for at least 2 weeks before that vote. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and I think just for me, the initial reaction was, how viable is it to have West Coast teams playing in the Big Ten, just from a logistics standpoint. But I think the more I thought about it, I think the future matchups against UCLA, especially in basketball, having that every season, I think that's a huge, huge win for Maryland fans, and I think that's something that they look forward to. And then being able to play USC, possibly in the Coliseum, I think that's something that is super intriguing. So, but like you said, Ryan, I don't know how something like this. Really just it was in a matter of a day. It felt like it just all kind of came to fruition. So it's a big shakeup, but it's the first of many pieces now.
It didn't even bother me with the West Coast teams. I mean, immediately I was just like, we have planes. Why is everyone making this a big deal? I don't understand. We're not getting in horse and buggies and going to these games. Like, yes, of course, you'll have to have creative things for the guys that drive like the equipment trucks and stuff. But the players, they're not going to be suffering like you've seen on these news. They're going to fly out. They're going to fly in just like they do everywhere else. It's not a thing anymore. It's going to have to be strategic planning for these truck drivers all across the country. But that's about it.
And I do agree with that. And I think from a football perspective, they only play 1 game a week, so that you're right. That's just about managing what time you fly out, what day you fly out, preparation. That's all adjustable. I just think from a basketball perspective, do you have Maryland playing at UCLA on a Tuesday night and then hosting on a Thursday night at home? I mean, I think just managing maybe road trips, seeing having it once a team goes out, they play at UCLA, at USC, at Nebraska, and then they come home. Just making it more logical from a logistical standpoint. Now, again, do those teams, do they stay out west, or do they find hotels? Do they come back home?
Like I think an MLB type schedule.
Yeah, I mean, and I think maybe that might be the final outcome. But I just think for the Big Ten as a whole, it's a big power move, and for the Big Ten to be able to add two
Strong
teams of this.
flex. Strong
Exactly.
flex.
For his
Absolutely. I mean, you're
prestige.
talking about two prestigious universities,
Yeah.
both on football and the basketball side. I mean, obviously, things have been a little bit down football wise for the past few years, but that's starting to change with all the big moves that USC's made over the last year and a half, right? So this is big, and I think it's big for the Big Ten in general. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about that. What are your guys' thoughts on how expansion in general helps the Big Ten?
Well, right now you just got LA. I mean, that's the big thing is we're coming up with these TV deals. Everyone knows it's what drives this. Everyone knows it's where this extra money is coming from. For the fan part of that is you now get to watch a game that matters at 9, 10 o'clock at night
Yeah.
instead of watching Hawaii versus, you know, I don't know, California Southern or something on TV because the Big Ten's done. There's no one playing. There's nothing to watch. So for me, it always helps. It's why I have a fantasy football team in the NFL. It gives you a reason to watch the other games. And now I'll have a game that matters at least a little bit to the Terps at all time periods. It's going to make being a fan that much more fun.
And obviously from college basketball season, you get Bill Walton on the mic. So I mean,
Clearly,
why
that's
not?
definitely a win.
Yeah,
Oh, that's a
it's
big win.
yeah. I think I don't know what he's gonna bring up first. His first Len Bias memory or what a terrapin is. So it's 50-50. But
Well,
yeah, I think from a pros and cons, I think from Maryland's perspective, it opens up the recruiting foothold. From that regard, you're able to go out west now. You have a more established brand, and like you said, we in the first part, there is more just prestige with the Big Ten now, just with the caliber of teams, with the teams, in both football and basketball. That compete at a high level. Having USC under Lincoln Riley now, I think is super intriguing.
yeah,
They become a pretty competitive challenger to Ohio State at the top, Michigan as well. So I think that'll be interesting. But a con could be, when I was at Good Counsel back in mid late June, Roy Manning, he was the assistant coach over at USC. He has a little bit more ammo to go into, the DMV homes and say, hey, we're going to be able to offer you a chance to get out west and build your own brand and do a lot more, and you have a chance to over your next 3 years you'll get a chance to play in front of your family and friends.
And low
right.
key, Locks has done pretty okay in California. Like that's been, behind the DMV and behind Florida, there has been a decent number of grabs out of California. A lot of them decide to get homesick and leave. There are a lot of them
Yeah.
staying 3 and 4 years. But as far as getting the recruits in the door, it's worked. So to have that start in the fact that we're now going to be a more relevant brand in that area, because we're already a mid-tier type college as is, and then you're talking in California when our noon games are before they're waking up for the day. It just doesn't help you very much.
Right. But speaking about like the division or the conference itself, do you see the landscape of the conference changing? Do you see them maybe doing away with divisions? How do you see that being impacted?
So I mean, the divisions East West, it was expected that this was going to go out the window, and I still think that is a pretty viable opportunity. But then we're talking about what is the overall conference realignment part two? What does that kind of look like? And at that point, if there is, some people are saying 18, 20, I've even seen 24 teams in a conference. At that point, you can't just have all 24 teams
Wow.
there. So then, do you split it up into three divisions? Do you have it like a Premier League style where you have a bottom, middle, upper tier, and the bottom team in the top division they get relegated down? I mean, I don't know. I'm just kind of
My,
throwing that idea out there. I think that it would be kind of intriguing, but
don't relegate the Terps, Ahmed. What are you doing?
yeah, I guess we would be affected by that.
That would not be good right now. Maybe later.
So for those that don't maybe understand how these realignments work, right? One of the questions that I know some your average fans out there might be wondering is, would Maryland be in any kind of potential danger for being moved out of the Big Ten, or is that even a possibility?
I don't think it is, just because when you look at what's kind of driving this, I think I saw the tweet, and the day the USC and UCLA were announced, with their additions, the Big Ten would have five of the top seven media markets in the country. So I think if you get rid of Maryland, you're losing a big portion of just the media market in general. So that's why I don't think that's going to happen. And obviously Maryland is locked in now. I don't see that being a move. And it's not like they're gonna be jumping at the bit to go to the SEC. I think they just, as a whole, I think culturally, even Maryland just really fits with the Big Ten style. So I don't think it's too likely or too realistic of a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, right now every school in is an AAU school except for Nebraska let it lapse. They're the ones that have vocally challenged the Big Ten beginning of last year and also don't have their AAU status. So we're not in danger until they're kicked out. So I'm not worried right now. I'm of the mindset we are still expanding. I think 24 is too much, but I think they are going for the Big Tens. I think this will end up being 2 10-team division. It will be the Big Tens, and that is where this ends up. So it looks like we're add 4 more in that scenario.
Well, I mean, if the Terps have no possibility of being removed from the Big Ten, then they look like absolute geniuses at this point. Being ahead of the curve and getting into the Big Ten 8 years ahead of time, during that expansion, I think speaks volumes of forward thinking and what Maryland was able to do 8 years ago.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think every Maryland fan, the years after it happened, they talked about, I missed the matchups against Duke, the UNCs,
Yeah.
UVA, Virginia Tech. Obviously, you get that with the Big Ten ACC challenge in basketball, but Maryland has yet to play Duke, and I think that's the matchup. Even when I was at Maryland, that was always the one. UNC, fans showed up, but Duke was the one that everyone kind of got their juices flowing for, would camp out for the longest, be most anxious to get. But I mean, obviously, at this point, when you look at where college athletics is in today's world, tradition kind of goes out the window. So, definitely Maryland did get heat, but now they're looking pretty.
The ACC will die, and some of those traditions will return to us.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a school like Virginia, Georgia Tech, I saw that was a school that got mentioned. And I think, Georgia Tech, there's a lot of history there, and obviously not as much, I'd say more on the football side than basketball, but that, like you said, Ryan, it will come.
Who's the one that you don't want to see from the ACC come over, and who's the one you do?
Oh man, well, let's get to that. Hang on. Before we get to there, I've got one follow-up question, specifically talking about these newcomers, right? So the Terps, from a football standpoint, have been scratching and clawing and just starting to get back into competitive football. Obviously, we just went to our first bowl game in a while, right? You add 2 powers like USC and UCLA to the conference. Does that put any dampers on the parade of expectations of where this team could be for the next few years?
Not for me. I don't put either one of these teams as they stand right now up there with Ohio State. Ohio State has been the untouchable beast, the one that the only time we came close was the very first game we went to together, Fred, with the overtime loss.
Right.
Every other time it's been an absolute steamrolling. Yes, there are teams that are on average are a lot better than us, but we have caught everybody on a down year, and I don't put these teams as is outside of that category. I do think USC is on the right track to become in that Ohio State category, with Caleb Williams being an all-time great type quarterback, in my opinion, and Lincoln Riley trying to rebuild what he did at Oklahoma. But neither one of those are Ohio State. I put them all in that Michigan State realm that I've always said that we can reach.
Yeah, I think you actually kind of mentioned a point. I mean, what were the odds that we ever thought that we'd actually see Caleb Williams play at Maryland? And
well, we won't. He'll be in the NFL by the time that happens.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true. So at least Maryland
we dodged him by 1 year.
it is kind of crazy, but I think UCLA. I think in football, I think they can compete. I mean, I don't think I know Chip Kelly. They were able to do some things last year, but I think that's a team that Maryland would be able to be competitive for. And I agree, USC, I think just kind of with everything that they've done so far this offseason, all the transfer additions and just the buzz, I think they're kind of on that path to challenge an Ohio State team. But I think
if it works out, it would, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that would be good for the conference. I mean, I think every year, you kind of go in with Ohio State as the mindset of that preseason Big Ten title favorite. So I think USC kind of going up on that track gives them some more juice. So I think just kind of having that parity right now is a good sign.
All right. Well, future thinking a little bit here. You guys kind of mentioned it earlier, right? This takes the conference from, what is it, currently sitting at 14 to 16 now, right? So we've heard rumors out there of it going to 20, 22, 24. So we don't know what that's actually going to look like. But there's already rumors going around about the next realm of schools that could be coming in, because you're going to see a bunch of changing going on around college football and all conferences combined. Who do you think will be the next one added to the Big Ten? Obviously, the prize jewel right now is Notre Dame out there. That's what everybody's talking about. It'll be interesting to see what happens with them, with their ties to the ACC right now, and if they're able to get out of that, and then where do they fall? But who do you think the next team is that comes into the Big Ten?
You kind of hit it. I think Notre Dame might end up being that next one. I think the Big Ten realizes, the Notre Dame fan base, just with the NBC contract, I think that draws a lot of additional potential revenue for the Big Ten. And I think the Big Ten might be a little bit patient. It seems like there's been a lot of reports that Big Ten's going to kind of stand pat. They know that there's outside interest, and, other Pac-12 teams have kind of maybe tried to do their own thing to either put pressure on their current conference, or maybe put pressure and say, if the Big Ten's going to entertain other options, and so are we. But it feels like it's going to be Notre Dame, and then once that domino falls, it kind of opens the next floodgate to the next wave of teams that make their announcements. So my pick is going to be Notre Dame, and when that happens, to be determined. But it feels like all signs kind of point to them.
I think that that's the next announcement. Whether that's actually the next one that agrees to it is another thing. So I think right now, you add anybody else, it's going to be almost like negative advertisement of like, look at this, just cash grab. We're just grabbing whoever at this moment. The only name that you can put out there and be like, well, yeah, of course, anyone that has the opportunity would take that squad is Notre Dame. So I think that they may have some handshake, wink, wink, nod, nod agreements with some of the ACC schools that see the writing on the wall, or the Pac-12 that's already been discussed, the Oregons or Washingtons. But the next one that announced, I believe, would be Notre Dame. I did put this out on our Twitter on Shell and Tell, just to ask, what's the next Big Ten, or what conference would the next Big Ten team be from? So I put out the ACC, the Pac-12, Big 12, and other. The results came in. We had some good votes, 118 votes. ACC was 33.9%, followed up by the Pac-12 at 29.7%, and then other at 26.3%. Other has to be Notre Dame, right? What's the other that's not Notre Dame in that scenario? I can't imagine where the people were voting for like a group of 5 school in that realm. So Notre Dame itself is getting some pretty heavy voting in there. And of course, we are ex-ACC country, and it just kind of makes sense. But then again, the Pac-12, the Washington and Oregons are looming out there big. Basically, we're not getting a Big 12 team. That's what the fans say.
I think Georgia Tech is also really interesting. I know you kind of talked about it, but just the Georgia Tech market, obviously Atlanta would add to become the 6th largest, or excuse me, it would give the Big Ten 6 of the top 7 largest TV markets in the country. And I think they kind of fit a lot. I think Virginia is another school that they also kind of culturally fit the Big Ten. And I think they kind of be on a similar path as, other schools. I feel like Oregon kind of does. I could see it if that happens. But Georgia Tech also kind of feels like maybe if it's not going to be Notre Dame, when you talk about, backdoor deals or whatnot, Georgia Tech kind of seems like that one where it seems just the most sensible.
I think you hit the nail on the head earlier. I think Notre Dame makes the most sense. I think from a school standpoint, a revenue standpoint, I mean, just everything. The Oregon thing is kind of intriguing to me from a football standpoint. I don't know a whole lot about the rest of the athletics with them, but from a football, the battle of the brands
flashed a couple of years ago. They were pretty good.
Right. But you get the battle of the brands with Nike and Under Armour in the same conference. I think that would be kind of cool, right? I don't know. I just think Notre Dame, to me, will be the next chip that falls.
See, Ahmed mentions Virginia in that conversation. I don't want it. I do not want Virginia in the Big Ten with us. I don't want to split the DC market with anyone. I don't want to see them as the local rivalry. I didn't enjoy playing them when we were in the ACC. I didn't like their fans. I didn't like anything about it. So I'll gladly welcome UNC back over and have some fun with basketball and see their new improved football team, because they were no good back in the day, and now they seem to got a little bit of juice behind them. But it's going to irk me if Virginia comes crawling back into our realm.
So yours is Virginia you don't want to see.
No, I do not want to see Virginia.
Yeah, I think if there's any school that I don't want to see, I mean, I think there's a part of me that wants Duke, because I selfishly miss those
Oh
basketball
yeah,
games.
absolutely.
But there's always this thing about UNC where I think I don't hate them as much as I do, and then I watch them and I'm like, wow, I really don't like you guys. So I think there's a part of me that doesn't really want to see North Carolina in the Big Ten. I think it's possible. I know that they were a school that's kind of been floated as a possible, Big Ten addition as well. Um, but yeah, I think that would be probably be my pick.
I think the Big Ten should be scared to add Duke. I don't know what Duke brings in a post K world.
Yeah, that's
They
very
do not
true.
have a football program worth
Yeah,
anything, and their basketball program is just retired.
it's a big
I mean,
question mark right now.
yeah, there is Duke can come 3 years from now when they prove they're still the dude. But right now, that would be on my sorry ACC. I can't have you. Like there's nothing guaranteed that Duke is even relevant 5 years from now.
I agree with that
Yeah.
for sure. I think for me, if I'm going to single out any school that I don't want to see, is I've got enough schools from the state of Pennsylvania and just Penn State alone. I don't want to see Pitt in the conference. I know that there could be some appeal to the interstate rivalry there with Pitt and PSU, but I'm good. PSU is the only state team from Pennsylvania that I need in the conference, so I'm good without them being in. Um,
I think they scream Big 12. I think they'll
Yeah.
join with WVU and try
Yeah.
to be that one lasting conference that's outside of the two monsters.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be kind of interesting, just we'll get into it, but just, if they go to the Big 12, Big 12, Pac-12, does that kind of stay together? What happens to ACC? So I think, kind of perfect transition into the next segment, but
yeah.
I think
Let's hop right into that, man.
yeah,
I mean, because I think to your point, the Pac-12 is just kind of dwindling away, and losing
We're
two
coming
teams.
for some more bodies, I think.
Yeah, losing two teams like USC and UCLA is a big hit. And then to your point, I think there are going to be some schools that leave and either go to the ACC or go down to the Big 12. I think their best bet is going to be to team up and create some sort of a small power, like a mid-tier power, combined with either the ACC or the Big 12. Logistically, the Big 12, I think, makes the most sense. And I think from a power standpoint on football side, I would choose, if I'm the Pac-12, I would choose a partnership with the Big 12 over the ACC, but that's just my point, or that's just my opinion on it.
Yeah, because the ACC is going to get robbed by both Big Ten and SEC.
SEC,
I mean,
absolutely.
the SEC is definitely looking at Florida schools. They're definitely interested in Clemson as long as they can bounce back from their bad year. I mean, it's
yeah.
you could even see a Virginia Tech fits well with the SEC, but there doesn't seem to be enough smoke there. It's interesting to me that doesn't come up more often because the fan base believes they're an SEC school.
Right.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit it right. I mean, if Notre Dame, North Carolina, Florida State, Clemson, UVA, if all those schools leave, who does ACC have? I mean, at that point, you have what, Louisville, Pitt, Virginia Tech, like you said. It's just there's
Syracuse.
not Syracuse. There's just not Boston
Which
College.
none of them are ACC schools.
Yeah, exactly. So I think you're kind of looking at these conferences trying to just save themselves. So I think just these loose partnerships. I know the ACC Pac-12 discussing that partnership, having a possible championship game in Las Vegas. That's something, again, TV market driven, and it makes sense why they would want to do that. But I think Pac-12, Big 12, kind of merging together. Maybe if there's going to be that third conference, that one seems kind of like that fit.
Yeah, I've also heard rumors about Miami, but
Yeah.
from what I've heard is that Florida doesn't want Miami in the SEC, and I guess that makes a whole lot of sense too, right? So Miami
think
would be the
Miami's-
last one standing.
Academically, I don't think Miami's going to get in the Big Ten. So what does
Right.
Miami fall apart because neither one of them wants them? Like, it's a big time program with a lot of money behind it, and I guess there'll be in whatever is left of that third tier there.
Yeah, there's a lot of money that's being thrown around at Miami, just with the coaching staff, recruiting, all of that stuff. So it's I have a feeling they'll have some say. And if Florida is the one school that doesn't want it,
Florida might get kicked out.
yeah, and maybe money talks. So maybe they'll end up being two schools in Florida and the SEC. So
It's been a while since your Irving Meyer days, Florida. Careful, you don't got as much swing as you think you used to.
So impact wise on college football as a whole, right? So obviously we're talking about 2, maybe 3 mega conferences potentially. 2 definite megas, 1 mid-tier mega.
Yeah. The group of 5 power conference.
Yeah. This initial change to the Big Ten doesn't go into effect for another 2 years, right? So they've got 2 years of planning and 2 years to really kind of hash this out and figure it out. My question is, and I'd like to, I'm interested to see what your guys' thoughts are on this. College football playoffs. Obviously, that's evolved over the last 10 years or so into this, 4-team playoff scenario, which football has always been the one sport that lacks that tournament, right? When you
Yeah.
think of all just sports in general, right? You think of even the College World Series, right? That's the only time baseball is relevant to the average fan is during the College World Series. You think of golf, you watch the major tournaments, right? You think of college basketball, you watch March Madness, you watch all of these tournaments. They have all this draw, but college football has lacked that. And I know they have the bowl games and all that stuff, but let's be honest, those bowl games, unless you're talking about the January 6th, mean nothing. They don't really draw a whole lot of fans and not
Except
a lot
for
of
the
people watch
pinstripe.
them.
It was a
Right.
blast.
Except for the
Pinstripe's the best bowl.
Pinstripe
bro.
was fucking great.
Yeah,
We'll
it's
do it
great.
again if we have to next year. But I'd be intrigued to see if this potentially changes that. Do they shorten a season, right? And do they enter maybe a 16 team or a 20 team tournament at the end of the season? What are your guys' thoughts on college football and potential changes to the playoff format?
I think you need players that want to play in the games. And as long as you still have people deciding not to play, then it's going to be awfully
But I think
interesting.
a playoff format changes that, right? Because a bowl game is a bowl game. It doesn't mean a national championship. But if you've got a 18th seed team or 19th seed team that's got a top level prospect, right? That's a potential draft prospect, but he thinks, well, shit, if I play, we got a chance at actually winning a national championship. That changes, I think, the mentality of what that athlete thinks.
I think there's a number. I don't think it can be as big as you're saying. I don't think that the 24th best team truly believes they have any shot in taking down.
I mean,
the
if you
entire
think
tournament.
about it, right? Think about the conference size, right? The conference sizes that are going to be there's going to be at least 5 or 6 teams out of the SEC that would make it. At least 5 or 6 teams out of the Big Ten that would make it. Probably 2 teams out of like the Big 12, Pac-10, if they were to combine together or whatever, right? So, I mean, you're already at 12 teams, and then you have to have a couple of spots for those smaller colleges that now stand a chance, right? They're going to be the first round blowouts that go out the window anyway, but you're at that 16-team tournament.
Believe me, I would really like it, and my wife would really hate it because if we ever got to the tournament, I would be at every game, no matter what the cost happened.
It would be amazing. And if we're talking about, what's driving all of this conference realignment, once again, TV, obviously, it's more advertising, more TV opportunities. So I think that's definitely there. I think, obviously, I don't think that the college football playoff is going to be around much longer once all of these schools get finalized and everyone's moved. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. You can't do 4 teams. I think maybe 12 or 16 team kind of makes it the best. I mean, I think with the 16, you're going to see the same names year in, year out, but you're still going to see different schools. And I think it'll be really interesting to see, with these moves with these, Ohio State and USC playing against each other, what teams kind of get knocked out. Some of these teams are going to have more than one, biggest game on the schedule. I mean, you look at the SEC and who some of those teams have to play week in, week out. Now that's going to be spread out a lot more evenly, I think, across these, these new conferences. I think the biggest, maybe another kind of takeaway from this is what happens to the smaller schools, like Maryland's
Yeah.
playing Buffalo, Tulane, for example. I mean, a lot of these schools, they make their dollars off of playing these Power 5 schools and getting those guaranteed payouts. So that's another implication of kind of what all shakes out out of this. But in terms of postseason and whatnot, I still think that we would have bowl games. There won't be any tie-ins, for example, because ACC and all of that. Like that's just completely different now. So how that's going to work will be interesting. But when it comes to playoffs, yeah, I think you go to that maybe double digit team format, and then it'll be interesting. Do they like? I mean, you can't start the season any earlier. You can't have players in school before the school year starts. So I think just do you make it 10 games and then it's 2 non-conference games, for example? So I think there's a lot of logistics that kind of needs to be worked out in that regard. But in terms of postseason, it's going to look completely different. 2-3 years from now than it does now.
Yeah, which is really interesting because right now that's where the big money is. It's the reason there's so many bowls is that people are making a decent amount of TV revenue off it. Sure, the fan support in a lot of these cities aren't very good. When you put them in cities nobody wants to go to in December.
You can use both of those together, right? So if you know you've got 16 teams, and you know you've got 8 games, there's still a tournament, but they can still be bowl games, right? The 8th seeded game is this bowl, the 7th seeded game is this bowl. You can still tie them together and label them as such. And I think that's going to draw more of an audience just because of the sheer tournament factor and these teams having a chance to play for more other than just winning the game and the trophy for that particular bowl. They have the chance at winning a game and moving on and advancing towards a national championship, which is just like the college basketball situation, the March Madness. And you get some of these schools, these 16 seed teams like the UMBCs who got a chance to play another round by beating a number 1 seed. I think it's going to draw huge amounts of viewership and it's going to draw huge amounts of money to college football that normally wouldn't be there because people just don't watch those smaller tier bowl games.
I mean, it absolutely would drive more. And the conversation that Ahmed had with the smaller schools is actually more about the rules of the conference than the size of the conference. So just the fact the Big Ten already talked about having additional Big Ten games and limiting the out-of-conference schedule before any of this ever happened, those were the type of decisions that actually hurt the smaller programs more than these conglomerations. Because we can have as many teams we want in the Big Ten. If we still have 4 out-of-conference games, those things could still survive. But if you decide we have so many Big Ten squads that we just need to play each other every week, we can't be having all these, Towsons and Buffaloes. Well, then what's going to happen is those teams aren't going to have football. You can still keep a basketball program, but you cannot keep a football program without these pay for play, without these big time TV revenues, without Texas paying Maryland $3 million to beat them on TV. You can't do it. You can't have it.
Yeah, I think it'll be kind of interesting to see how it all shakes out, but just felt like the inevitable from what we thought would happen in college football. It just sped up, and we're in the middle of it now. The whole UCLA USC just started it all, so it's going to be really interesting to see how it all shakes out.
But I mean, are we sure? Because I know we want it. We just want to get the Band-Aid and rip it off, but like. Didn't it feel just like that when Oklahoma and Texas did this, 18 months ago? And then nothing happened. Like, we just sat until now, until this decision. So, at some point, there's going to be a windfall. It has to be because there's no reason for these things to happen. But we don't know if that's now or we don't know if that's 2 years from now when UCLA and USC start or when the TV contract gets signed with the Big Ten and everyone sees how much money that actually got us. And they're like, oh, everybody should go do that before their next TV deal. I just don't know when it's going to happen. I think it's up to Notre Dame because if Notre Dame decides to come today, it's over. There's going to be a free-for-all grab fest for anything that's worth value. But if Notre Dame still sits on their hands and pretends they're bigger than football like they've been doing for the last 15 years, even though they've been next to irrelevant for 90% of the time, then we're just going to be stuck here.
Yeah,
there's one of those, every year overrated teams. It's just every year they're in the top 5 preseason. They end at 25 and they probably shouldn't be there.
I don't know. I do agree with you. Notre Dame is going to put one of these conferences over the edge. And I think it's going to set a lot of other schools into panic mode as to where they're going and what conferences are grabbing what schools and all that stuff to try to keep the balance. But I think it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see at the end of everything, how many conferences are actually left in college sports, right? In college football, right? If there's 5 conferences, 6 conferences, however many conferences it is, because then at that point it's real easy to structure that playoff scenario, I think, because you just, say this amount of teams out of the SEC, this amount of teams out of the Big Ten, and this amount of teams out of the lower tier conferences, right? I'm excited for it. I think it's going to be exciting for the fan, for college sports, but again, they're 2 years away, right? So at least from this change, beyond any other changes, from this change, they're 2 years away. So they've got time to get this right, and let's just hope that the NCAA gets this right more so than they did with NIL because they just rushed that shit out.
If I had some money to invest in football right now, I'd be out there investing in these Iowa community colleges and the California community colleges because what's going to happen is you're going to have, 2 mega conferences, one kind of relevant, and then the Power 5 is going to start drying up. They're not going to have enough money to or the group of 5, I'm sorry, is going to start drying up and canceling programs, and all these JUCOs that have been built up to be bigger than what they are just going to be the minor leagues for these two monsters. And it's going to just be a minor league system for the minor league system that is the Big Ten and SEC for the NFL. We're minor league baseball now. We got 6 levels.
Yeah, I could see that. And I think, back to your point about Notre Dame, whether, when that domino falls, and you're right, it could be a year from now, it could be 6 months from now, it could be 18 months from now. But I think the fact that there are so many schools like the Pac-12 schools that try reaching out to the Big Ten, and the Big Ten saying, nope, we're going to stand still right now.
People wanted it to keep going, but there was a pause for a reason. I think the pause is Notre Dame.
But I think with Oregon, kind of going back to the Pac-12 and maybe initiating, what the Pac-12 announcing that they're going to immediately begin negotiations for, new TV market deal. And, now all these Pac-12 and ACC schools that are being rumored. So I think there are a lot of schools that are kind of looking out for themselves, and whether they make an immediate move to be determined. But, when we talked about Georgia Tech kind of making maybe like verbal agreements behind the scenes, things like that, that's what could be happening behind the scenes. So it feels like, when the next domino drops, which seems like it's going to be Notre Dame, that's when all these schools they're going to make their move.
I think my big thing is I want to see these contracts. Like, why was it public knowledge of what Maryland had to go through? We paid $50 million to get out of the ACC. We had 5 years of a partial payment, and then we got the full payment of the Big Ten. Why do I know that? But I don't know anything about UCLA. I don't know anything about USC, and you just can't find it. I'd be interested to see, do they get full shares right away? Did they get 3 years of partial payments, and then they go to full instead of 5 years like we got? Because I think that's kind of, if I'm the Big Ten, that's the route I would go, because I'd be like, hey, yeah, you're better than Maryland and Rutgers, but we need to expand now. And then that way you can also go to Notre Dame and be like, look, we know you're bigger. We know that you're the big fish. Full payment right away. Like, make them feel special, because that's what they are. They like to feel special. So absolutely. I hope they left one little bullet in the chamber for Notre Dame just to pull them out of the ACC.
Well, there's a lot of questions to still be answered. But again, to me, it's exciting. It's exciting for the Big Ten. I think it's exciting for the University of Maryland. Again, it's going to bring more money to the program as well, which is always a plus. Maybe we can get that practice facility finally done. We'll see. But I'm excited. There's a lot of things to change and a lot of things to come. So we'll talk more about that on our next show. We got a lot of commitments that recently happened that we're going to update you on the next show as well. So make sure you stay tuned for that.
Yeah, make sure you check out the Inside the Bag with Ahmed, where they just talked about all those commitments as well.
Absolutely. And make sure you're following us on all the social media platforms. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Facebook. Follow us on YouTube. If you're not following us on YouTube, what are you doing? We're doing a video podcast now, so make sure
you're fire intro. At least go check it out.
It is a fire intro. Ryan, sign us off.
All right, guys, everything's changing in the world. We talked about the football landscape falling apart. The rest of sports comes with it. So we will see how this goes. The countdown to kickoff stands at 58 days right now. If you're not following us on Twitter and Instagram, check that out. We've done an edit for every Terp player down from 99 to 59 so far. And just keeps that little bit of enjoyment, that countdown to the best days of fall. I hope to see you guys at our next episode and down at some of our tailgates. Until next time, here's to wishing all is well under the shell.